Hi, and welcome back to Reading Tea Leaves. I am John Ross, and this is where I take your stock and I run it through my brew of technical, sentiment, and macroeconomic tea leaves to let you know what I think of the stock and where I think it's going. This is also where I give you a little insight into my morning routine and my workday, and that is what type of tea I'm drinking. So today's tea is Supreme White Monkey Green Tea, and I'll tell you more about that in just a second. But before I do that, and before I get into today's stock, I want to remind you, hit the like button, the subscribe button, or the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any of the new content that we publish to Reading Tea Leaves YouTube channel. At the same time, if you want to help us out and you want to spread the word and you want to share what you've found here in Reading Tea Leaves, go ahead and share a link to this video with your friends, with your buddies, with people you know, people you talk to who have some type of interest in investing and in trading. We would very much appreciate that. Now, today's stock is a payment processor known as Square Inc. And maybe you've seen the little white square attached to a merchant's cell phone. They're sliding your credit card when you're buying something, whether you're at a food truck or in a little boutique or what have you. But anyway, Square's a pretty good sized company. They've been around for about 5 years now, and they're really doing a lot of things to enter into the consumer purchases and payment sort of ecosystem. And it's a really neat company. They do things well. However, their stock might be at a point where it needs to pull back here. And before I get into that, let me just say Square is a company that competes with the likes of PayPal or Visa or MasterCard, a smaller company called Stripe. And essentially, that little square that you've seen is part of sort of half, let's say half of their business. The other half is something newer called their Square Cash app. And so really the easiest way to think about this company is that half of it is this Square Cash app and everything else kind of falls into the rest, and the other half. And so that's important, just how we think about the stock in the near term and in the long term. Now, when it comes to its payment processing, which is really what kind of put the company on the map, its exposure is to some of the smaller mom and pops, the restaurants, the boutiques, the smaller retail type stuff. And as you might imagine, in this environment of lockdown and shutdown, and business just being ground to a halt, some of the smaller guys who might have trouble bridging the gap, when income and revenues drop, when they're having to lay off or furlough employees. This exposure that Square has might be a bit of a weight around the stock. However, the good news for the stock, which has helped really drive this rebound we've seen along with a lot of other tech companies, in the last month and a half, is the fact that this Cash app, which is similar to like Venmo or Zelle, which allows users to just essentially pass cash from one to another in order to pay or in order to transfer funds. Square is also incorporating the ability to buy and sell things with Bitcoin. At the same time, they're also creating some type of interface or whatever, I'm not a tech guy, to allow users to trade stocks as well, or exchange stocks. So all kinds of neat stuff going on with Square. They're investing a lot of money right now into a lot of different things. So in some sense, that's very good, for the company's future. In another sense, they're plowing money into things that have not yet proven, into an economy that is struggling, an economy that has just entered recession. So a lot of things in play here for Square that argue for a higher stock price in the long run, but maybe in the short run kind of suggests that we might see some pressure put on the stock. Now, with all that said, let me jump into the stock and then we'll get into today's tea. Let's start with a daily chart of Square, and as usual, I've got the 200-day moving average there in blue. That is just an indication of where the stock, are the black bars, the stock price is trading relative to its longer term trend. And then the red line across the bottom is the 14-day relative strength index. And that just gives us kind of a sense of the strength of the stock price in the last 14 days to just give us a sense of where where might be the path of least resistance for the stock in the near term. Now, if we want to start there at the 14-day RSI, you can see it trading up near that upper bound, which is set at 70. So on a scale of 0 to 100, once the RSI of a stock gets to around 70, you start to consider maybe this stock is a bit overbought. Maybe it's overextended to the upside and it is due for a bit of a decline or a correction or some type of sideways pause or consolidation. So I do think we have to be mindful of the RSI at this level and open to the fact that the stock might be due for a bit of a decline. Now let's jump up to that 200-day moving average. As you can see, after sort of trying to test that level at the beginning of April, the stock eventually did get up there to test it again at the end of April and has made its way up through that pretty convincingly this month, in the month of May. Now, let's draw in some of the AMPs, or the apex movement patterns, that I like to look at just to get a sense of where we might expect some shorter term turning points. And if we call the initial bounce from the March low the A wave, we mark it in there, and then the decline from that level would be the B wave. And then at that point, we would look for the third wave. The third wave tends to extend the first wave, so we'll call it the C wave, and we'll look for it to extend 100% of the A wave. Now, you can see that it did that around that first test of its 200-day moving average. That came out to be somewhere around a 100% extension of the A wave, as you can see with the extension tool that I've drawn in there. However, we know that from that level, the stock consolidated for a few days, moving sideways, then eventually came up to retest that 200-day moving average again and broke through it. Now, to get a sense of where the stock is relative to this extension tool, it's beyond that 100% extension. So then we start to look for a 161.8% extension. Now, there is an important level before you reach that, and that's where the stock has found a bit of short-term resistance, and it has consolidated. Today, on Tuesday, the stock is breaking higher above recent highs, suggesting maybe it is on its way to a full, complete 161.8% extension. Now, if we expect the stock to find a top, then what type of decline should we expect? Well, I would draw in a retracement tool. First, I would draw it in just for this C wave move, just to get a sense of if it were to retrace that, where would that take it? Now, a 38% retracement, which is a logical initial retracement target, that would take it back down to that 200-day moving average, which comes into play around 64.85, more or less. So again, a logical pullback. And if it were to do that, then we would see some type of a decline in the neighborhood of 16% from current levels, which is a pretty decent correction. Now, of course, depending upon the macroeconomic backdrop, what the broad market is doing in response to all the economic forces and headwinds and recessionary expectations that are going to factor into a stock like Square, depending on what's happening in the backdrop, will depend on how deep I think the sell-off could extend or retrace its rebound. If we were to retrace 61.8% of just this C-wave move, then we're looking at a 26% decline. If we wanted to pull that back and just take this entire AMP, this three-wave move, that would put us at 26% decline would put it at about a 50% retracement of that, going even deeper, somewhere around a 34% decline. Now, a 34% decline is not my base case for this stock. Again, a lot of that will depend upon the broad market sentiment, which has the potential to deteriorate a lot considering how quickly sort of investors' optimism has returned here, despite the fact that we don't know how long this recession is going to last or just how bad it's going to work its way into corporate earnings, even of the stronger stocks, particularly the tech sector where we find Square. All right. Hope that sort of gives you a little bit of insight, or a lot of bit of insight into Square, gives you kind of an idea of maybe how you can be adding to positions if you are already positioned in Square, maybe where you can kind of limit your risks, maybe drop some stop losses, things of that nature. So without further ado, real quick before we close, Supreme White Monkey Green Tea. This is a Chinese green tea, and it gets its name because the leaves, when they're dried, they have these fine white silvery bristles that look like the hair of the white monkey's paw or on its tail. So that's what the name it's been given. The Chinese name is Baimao Hou, if I'm not butchering that. But it's really a very nice tea. It's not something that you can easily over brew, like a lot of green teas, which become very astringent if they brew just a little bit too long. But this is one that you can go a little bit longer without ruining it. I do like to brew my teas a little bit longer, just for that to just bring out more and more flavor. So I can highly recommend this one. Drink up. Now, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of Reading Tea Leaves. Thank you, as always, for sending in your stocks that we can run through the tea leaves. I want to remind you to keep on doing that. We've been getting a lot of great recommendations to look at. And, if you've been following Reading Tea Leaves, you'll know that one of the stocks that one of you asked about that we talked about a couple weeks ago, Waiter Holdings, which is a curbside, or not a curbside, but it's a food delivery service. That stock has taken off from when we recommended a buy on it. So things like that, a really awesome way to be participating in Reading Tea Leaves, using it to help you make a lot of money trading these markets. Hit the subscribe, hit the like, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. But as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll talk soon.